I have my father's surname, which I was given by my parents. The reason behind this is because when my parents got married, my mother took on my father's last name, in turn losing the surname that she grew up with. And this wasn't a one-off case. Across the globe, the common tradition is that when a man and a woman get married, the wife removes her surname and takes on the surname of her husband, in turn giving that surname to their children and allowing that surname to carry on. So how and why is this the case? When did this tradition start? The name that follows your first name takes on many names: surname, last name, second name, family name, but the names for this name we are interested in are maiden name and married name. The term maiden name is the name for a woman's surname before she is married, with married name obviously being the name a woman takes on when she is married. Along with surname changes, a woman also traditionally changes her title when she marries too. The three popular titles are Miss, Mrs and Ms. Traditionally, Miss is the title used for an unmarried woman, Mrs is used for a married woman, and Ms is used interchangeably for a woman who doesn't want to use either of the other two, regardless of their marital status. Ms grew in popularity through the 50s and 70s during women's movements, as a title shown to have the equal respect of Mr. It is possible for men to have maiden names too. One article I read was from a man surnamed Howe who took on his wife's surname Verhoevic. Due to his wife having a rather unique surname, and she came from a family of just daughters and he had brothers to carry on his name, they decided that the Verhoevic name would carry on in their marriage, making his previous surname of Howe his maiden name. From what he and I could gather is that there isn't another name for this. It's not called a paternal name or anything. Maiden has roots in words like earliest, first or original, so it makes sense for a man's original name to be called a maiden name too. Though in that aforementioned case the husband took his wife's surname, the more popular tradition is that wives take their husband's names. So where did this tradition start from? For this we need to go back to England in the past. To start with, surnames weren't all that important. Most people in medieval England were known by just their first name, which was cemented in baptism, hence why they are also known as Christian names. However, as the population grew, it got harder to keep track of everyone, so surnames were formed too, with surnames coming from places like your parenthood, your occupation, or your place of birth. It was around the 9th century in England where this custom of women taking their husbands' names became more commonplace. It was in this time lawmakers thought more into personhood and marriage, and at this time of history women didn't have the rights they do now. Women were considered one with the men in their life. They took their father's name and only changed it to their husband's name when they were wed. This was known as coverture, and it meant that when a woman got married, her separate existence disappeared and the husband and wife were treated as one entity. In the eyes of the law, women were just seen as an extension of the man in their life, whether that be their father or husband. Of course, as time has gone on, this law of coverture has dwindled, with women being able to keep their own names. Changing your name after marriage also appears to be a fair bit of work, involving getting your marriage license, then changing it in all the appropriate places, such as on your passport, social security card, driving license, bank accounts, all that kind of stuff. I can understand how more women might be put off taking their husband's names, especially if they're as lazy as me when it comes to sorting out paperwork. As well as there being enough time passing for women to no longer have to take their husband's surnames, marriages have become more accessible to many more people. In many parts of the world, men can marry men and women can marry women, which is awesome. But of course that got me thinking, what are the name changing conventions when it comes to homosexual marriages? Well, from one 2015 article I read, it seems there aren't any soft traditions when it comes to name changes in homosexual marriages. Some couples keep their own names, some took on other names, and some double-barreled their names. There's a lot of interesting points in the article which will be linked down below. Some chose to keep their name for business reasons. It's the name their audience know them by, and others changed their name to their partner's names solely because it sounded nice and was easier to pronounce. One couple, Martha West and Tanya Calavas, chose to host a football match. Well, the article says soccer, but shush. The winning team would have their name used as the name in their wedding and marriage. The match ended in a tie and the name is still being decided on. All of this leads us to now, 2019, unless you're watching this in the future, and if you are, don't forget to like and subscribe. What is the current state of wives taking their husband's names after marriage? Well, it seems that more women than ever are deciding to keep their maiden names, with roughly 20% of women choosing to do this, though that does leave 80% of women sticking to tradition, and that's fine too. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but say if you are getting married and want to break the tradition, well, here are some things you can do. Keeping your own name is a more acceptable option now more than ever, but of course there's the option I mentioned earlier, where the husband takes their wife's surname, which is too becoming more popular. One article from the BBC spoke with men who took their wives' names and how they were treated for taking this seen as untraditional option. One man said that his father said it was the biggest slap in the face for him and the family. Honestly, this concept of a husband taking his wife's name and the stigma that surrounds it could be a video into itself. There's too the option of taking on a double-barreled surname, where both names are hyphenated as one name, but of course with that comes the argument of who whose name goes first. A really interesting thing I read focused more on the name of your child than the name taken on during marriage, and that's the idea of blending both surnames together. So if one parent is called Smith and the other called Jones, you could take on the surname Smones as a married couple and in turn name your child that, leading to a new or awesome name. Traditions are weird things. Even the most open mind of us can find it hard to let go of certain traditions. I know there are certain traditions in my life that I refuse to let go of, but maybe it's something we need to think about more in life. No one gets arrested if you break a tradition, but still we can find it so hard to let go of them. And perhaps one of the most interesting traditions to discuss is the tradition of a wife taking her husband's name. Thank you to all my patrons who support Name Explain on a monthly basis. Name Explain depends on small monthly donations from fans like you to help keep the channel running. Just a small amount of $2 a month helps out in a huge way, grants you patron exclusive Name Explain extras, and gets your name here with all these awesome people. Thank you.